G'day everyone, we're back. Part 2 of our end of financial year bonanza, Jack. This part, we'll take a bit more of a deep dive into the PSR and the hole that I guess that we found ourselves, well, the £60 million hole that we found ourselves in going into the last week of the transfer window. So we'll just get stuck into it straight away. How does a club, a professional world-renowned sports club, find itself in a £60 million hole going into the last week of the financial year?
I don't know. That's a big question. End of pod.
Thanks everyone for listening and watching.
I think especially because all Darren Eales and even Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth had talked about before this was, we're going to comply. We're not going to be in a position where we don't comply. We're going to follow the rules. They've known what the rules are. It is apparent now. Like I wasn't sure if the scale of the hole that they've got themselves into, which like we said in part 1, only became apparent over the weekend, probably on Saturday. The fact that we've sold players to the value we have is suggestive that was the hole, which is a fucking big old gap in the finances. To leave it this late as well. I know transfer deadlines always go to the very end, but it wasn't leaving a lot of margin for error or sort of something to fall through. I think there's multiple reasons probably why it's got to this point, none more so than the fact that we've been spending money like it's going out of fashion for the last 2 years because we had to, because we wanted to start to compete and to get good quickly from a low base. So whenever we cry for new signings and transfers and that, because that's what we want, we're a rich club now, we're an ambitious club. This is the kicker to that. There is a consequence, and we can't just go spending money whatever we want. And this is why in January we didn't spend money. A lot of the people who were unhappy about the handling of this the last few days were probably the people who were demanding transfers incoming in January. So I think that's how they've done it. They've spent a lot of money on bringing the squad from a poor state up into competing in the Champions League, packed full of good players, good quality players. And it just sort of caught up with us. And it seems like it could have very nearly led to a points deduction or losing some of those good players I just mentioned. So, yeah, I'm relieved at how it's gone, how we've come out of it. But there's probably a lot of reasons that the club maybe it was inexperience on their part as well, that they didn't really know what they were doing, or the plans they did have didn't happen. So maybe we can talk a bit about those. But yeah, lots of probably things have led to this.
Yeah, so it probably feels like a bit of a boy who cried wolf in a way, because every transfer window it was mentioned, we can't, we've got the FFP rules that we have to adhere to, and we're very cognizant of the fact that we want to comply with them, and then they'd go and spend 40 million on Anthony Gordon and Tonali and Isak and things like that. So it kind of was, you took what they said with a pinch of salt, because they kind of said this the whole time and went and brought someone. And I think in January we were all expecting it to happen as well, and it probably wasn't until Keith was at the front of St James's Park on deadline day going, no, I don't think anything's going to happen here. And everyone went, oh, maybe they're telling the truth this time. So with the deadline, so we'll call it the deadline, the end of financial year deadline was 100 times more stressful than the transfer deadline, because whatever happens on the transfer window deadline, it's neither here nor there. It doesn't really affect your club in any real capacity. So whether you're trying to sign a player and you can't get him over the line, or you're selling someone and it falls through and he ends up staying, or it's not really that detrimental to your club. And I know some people say, well, yeah, it is if they're late and you can't replace them and stuff. But you get the opportunity to do it again in 3 or 4 months' time. You can go back into the market and stuff. There's serious repercussions for getting the financial year window wrong. And like you said, we were bordering on either a 10-point deduction or losing 2 of our best players. So that's how serious it was. And for me, that pales into insignificance compared to an actual transfer window deadline where there's no real repercussions if whatever you're trying to do doesn't work out. But without knowing, like you said, without knowing all the facts, and I think we said in part 1 that they probably will come to light at some stage as to what exactly happened, that the club ended up where it was. But what's some of the things we could have done to avoid this? Like, for me, you can't say, oh, we couldn't have bought players, because I think we bought Livramento, Tonali, Harvey Barnes, and Minte in the last window. So Lewis Hall can't be included in that because we didn't actually buy him in that financial period. That's since been ratified today. So that counts in this year's figures. So you can't, and everyone can say he was a waste of money and things like that because of Eddie's reluctance to play him in the probably first 3 quarters of the season. But we didn't actually pay. There wasn't an outlay for him. So it was kind of like a free hit, although it has been moved now. But he was really good towards the back end of the season, and I think he showed quite a bit that he could be a key player for us in the future. But what are some of the things you think that some of the levers we could have and perhaps should have pulled to maybe generate this £30 million and we could have kept Elliot Anderson perhaps?
Well, the thing that other football clubs have done consistently over a couple of years, which we haven't done, is sell players, player trading. Last summer, we were in a position where, in the summer before that, in the January before that, where we didn't want to lose our good players who are worth money to other clubs because they're too good and too important to us. So our ability to sell players over the last 2 years has been horrendous. I think in one of the financial periods,
than that.
Yeah, there was only 4 million. There was something like 8 million sold over 2 transfer windows before we sold Maxi and Chris Wood as well. But we didn't get much from him because we'd already paid and we already owed money for him. So Maxi was the only one. Even that was not a great sale, 20 million. Like when you look at the sales of Minte and Anderson, how did we lose Maxi for, significantly less than what we sold them for? So selling has been a problem over the years, and it's funny now that we've been saying for all that time we need to become a good selling club. Well, we've just done some pretty spectacular selling of players who are not even in the first team, and I think we're just not used to it as a fan base, losing young players or having to sell players now. So we need to become a good selling club, and it looks like we maybe have taken a few steps towards that. What could we have done? There's the stuff about raising the revenue as well. Have we maximized commercial avenues enough? Who knows? Like we don't know the detail, but on the face of it, we don't have a sleeve. We don't have a sleeve sponsor. We don't have a training ground sponsor, a training kit sponsor, a stadium sponsor, which all of a sudden would be quite happy to rename St James's Park now because we've been conditioned so much into this financial vortex of this is what you need to do as a football club, that we're all crying out now for St James's Park to be renamed, which is absolutely mad when you actually think about it. So like this world we're living in is just sort of a weird upside down crazy world which we've found ourselves in, and the club have got to try and navigate this and work our way through it. Maybe we need more experience in the boardroom as well. Who knows? I don't know. I'd love to know what goes on behind the scenes, but we're not privy to that. Chris Woff done a really good article who is privy to some of that stuff over the last few days, which is well worth a look at.
It was a good deep dive.
Yeah, so there's what could we have done without knowing the details? Who knows? You can just speculate on a few areas we could have got better at, and definitely selling players is something we're going to have to use moving forward.
Yeah, and sometimes I think we have to buy to sell, like we've done with Minte as well. Like find that gem, very very similar to what Brighton have done. Like find these gems and get yourself a really good scouting network and sell them for ridiculous money, and that'll help. Sort of, especially with us. I think Brighton probably aren't as ambitious as what we are in terms of where we want to go and what we want to do. I think they're pretty happy being a stable Premier League team and just to keep doing what they're doing and reinvesting and selling low, buying low, selling high. But I think our ambitions are a little bit higher than theirs. So, but if we can take anything out of what they do, I think that'll definitely help us. I think when you said the stadium renaming, I think that's a lot easier sell now than what it was a week ago in terms of anyone kicks up. I think the blowback will be, do you want to lose another Elliot Anderson then? And then I think people will, that's not, I'm not really that attached to the name St. James's Park if it means we can keep Lewis Miley or someone like that, you know what I mean? Like an academy player who kind of fans do take a bit of an affinity to, and they do cut more slack than what they do regular players because they're a local kid and they've come up through the ranks, and that's just how it works. Not just at our club, at every club. So I definitely think they've missed a trick with the training kit stuff. That's been bowling away for what seems to be bloody 12, 18 months, and they still haven't got it sorted. So I thought something might have come in with the Adidas deal where they might have announced a sponsor with the new supplier, but obviously that hasn't happened. And the training ground stuff, I don't know why. Like we haven't acted on that. And I know, I think I did. I'm not sure if it was on the Amazon thing and that they had offers, but it just wasn't something they were looking at or something they liked enough that they were going to pull the trigger on and do. But I mean, they're probably regretting doing it now. I think if you kind of added up a training kit, a training ground, a stadium sponsor, you probably would have got the 30 million that you needed to get yourself out of the hole, and meant keeping Elliot Anderson. But like you said, 35 million for Elliot Anderson's really, really good business. So I guess the second part of this is the whole Dan Ashworth thing. Now, you'd be a fool to think that didn't have anything to do with it. And I know that he wasn't sort of that in depth with the commercial side of things with Peter Silverstone, but as he described, he's the guy in the middle of the wheel connecting everyone together. And I think his loss has been really felt, especially in the last 4 months as well. And I think the fact that we haven't replaced him yet, and we haven't, to be honest, we haven't really looked like replacing him. I think there was maybe a couple of months ago, there was word of like a Paulo Nedved or somewhere like that was kind of come out of nowhere. But ever since then, it's been absolutely dead quiet on the director of football front. And I think how it is now, I think that appointment's kind of getting to the stage where it's really got to get acted on, and we've got to have some kind of a proper hierarchy at the club. And Eddie, and I don't think he'll take a back seat. I think he's a real hands-on guy and things like that. I don't think that's going to dictate and stuff like that. That just seems he seems like a really controlling manager and wants to say in everything, which is fine. But I do think we do need someone to try and help steer the ship and give him a bit more of a break to focus on the coaching side of things rather than all the off-field stuff as well.
Yeah, and you want a level of expertise in those key executive positions as well. Dougie Friedman, we made an offer to, but then he's signed a new deal at Crystal Palace. So I don't know if he was really interested or if he was always planning on staying at Palace. There's Johannes Spors, who's the guy from 777, who was also apparently on the short list. So
they've gone to ground.
Yeah,
so
like
figuratively and
a club of our size and ambitions needs a director of football or technical director or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of what I was touching on with the expertise thing. Staveley seems to have gone a bit quieter lately, and I know that she's reduced her stake in the club as well, and she's had her own sort of financial problems going on. So Murdad seems to have gone quiet. The Rubens have obviously only got a small stake. Piff are the big ones who they own 80% of the club, or a little bit more than that now, I think. So what do they want to do? You know, you'd be hard pressed to think they're not sitting there watching what's just unfolded, thinking, what's going on at such a high profile investment of ours, you know? We need the right people in the right places. They've got Darren Eales and Silverstone. Like I said, a lot of this goes on behind closed doors, so you don't actually know what happens or who's doing what.
Goes on in big castles too.
In big castles, yeah,
Yeah.
Northumberland. So, but yeah, you'd think that you'd hope that the structure of the club will be more embedded from now on. But we can now sell academy players for 35 million. That's a good sign moving forward, because we haven't actually had anyone up till now who we have wanted to sell, like I said before, who wouldn't have been a major problem to the first team if we sold them. And now, if we can sell players for that much money, maybe this is a one-off. I don't know, but we're stocking the academy all the time as well. And
I was going to say we're always
going to be a
adding
slow burn to get
new
there.
players. Yeah. But it
So
could be a 3, 4 year, 3, 4, 5 year kind of process. But with it seems like every other week someone's joining the academy. So
yeah,
geez, all you need is honestly, all you need is 1 or 2 of them to be really, 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 really good. And even if the rest are just really good, that's fine. They're the ones you sell and they're the ones you make money off and stuff like that. But there's no quick fix. You can't wave a magic wand and fast forward. You just got to play the waiting game now and things like that. But you're right, the hierarchy thing's been an issue, and the club have been awfully quiet. Not that I get it, but what do you want them to say? They're not going to come out and say, "Oh, look, by the way, we're in the shit here. We've got to sell some players. So sorry about that." I think their communication's been pretty good since they started. But you're right, Amanda and the Rubens and Meerdad and things like that, they've probably taken the back seat. But PIF are the one. I think the idea was for Amanda and Meerdad to kind of run the day-to-day until your Dan Ashworth kind of come in and he could kind of take things over and then take a back seat again. So they're probably doing more than they want to do because this whole director of football hasn't been sorted yet, and their heart's in the right place, but and they've done some really good things, don't get me wrong, but they just don't have that experience that someone else would, or a Dan Ashworth would, and things like that. It might only be 5%, but when you're in this sort of space, that 5% means a lot.
And there's also a question about why Ashworth wanted to leave. I know that people don't like him now because he's gone to Man United, but what was it about this project that made him not want to stay? Why was it not attractive enough to him for him to want to stay? Maybe it wasn't what it was sold to him as. Maybe he just wanted to go for more money. Who knows? But there's definitely a bit of a void there now. And in terms of communication, you can't expect the club to come out and explain everything that happens all the time. But it's probably been a while since anyone senior has actually said anything. No one came to Australia, so Eddie was doing the press then. Piers Silverstone did, but no one spoke.
I had a beer with him at the casino, so I can confirm that he was here.
No one spoke to the press though, and Eddie was doing the press conferences and explaining the 8-0, the decision to play the kids and stuff. So maybe now would be a good time for them to come out and say, we know that wasn't ideal, but we've got away with it. I don't know. I don't know how they would want to say it. And this is what we're going to do, because the PIF, you hear people say things that are PIF losing interest. Are they sick of the financial restrictions? Don't know. We knew the restrictions to an extent when they came in, but then there's been all of these related party rules that have been rushed in to try and stop them. But at the end of the day, these are serious people. I think that the club is still in an extremely strong position. And I always talk about this, but Peter Silverstone said at a True Faith event last summer that the club would be in a better position now than what it was this time last year, even if we're not in Europe. And I think we are in a better position generally now that we've had this near miss. We'll see what happens. But I do think some sort of direction from the leadership, so it's not all on Eddie Howe to explain what's going on, would be useful. There's things about the stadium and stuff that we don't know what's happened to that feasibility study, all this sort of stuff. So a little bit of communication. But like I've said from the beginning, these people are not our friends. They're business people who are in it for their own reasons. They don't care about our connection with Bruno or Anthony Gordon or whoever, Isaac, whoever it might be, or Elliot Anderson. They don't care that he's an academy product that we like. They just think, right, there's 35 million. That's going to sort out this financial problem. So we always just have to be a bit wary of the owners as well, and know that they're in it for their own reasons. So, but we do need some kind of direction and leadership, I think, from the top of the club from now on.
Yeah. So we'll kind of kick along to the whole PSR thing. So PSR is FFP, basically just renamed and rebadged and things like that. And it's probably been a bit of a shit show, really, for the last 12 months. I think it started when Forest were promoted and they brought bloody 57 players by the sound of it, but they had to because a lot of their team from the championship were either out of contract or loan players, so they had to actually fill their squad, which we had some Forest fans on, I think, for the first game that season, and they explained why they were going so nuts in the transfer window, which was totally understandable and things like that. But I think it kind of come to a head, I think, when we maybe started to break through and it looked like we were going to sort of upset the top six and stuff like that. And then Aston Villa, once they'd sold Jack Grealish, they'd spent a lot of money on players to get themselves in a position where this season or the past season, they'd made the top four as well. But having done all that spending, it's caught up with them too. And they're kind of back in the hole and kind of where they were before they sold Jack Grealish. So I think they've just sold Douglas Luiz for 30 odd million. I think that's to save them and get them out of their PSR predicament as well. But I was reading this today, Jack, and you sent me a thing explaining. So in the next sort of phased over the next 2 or 3 seasons, PSR is going to be actually phased out, and the Premier League are going to fall in line with UEFA's spending now, which is more of a cost to revenue basis, as they probably like to call it. So basically, at the moment, you can lose 105 million over 3 seasons, and that's just a rolling 3 seasons, so that keeps going on. But with the cost to revenue, so by the 25-26 season, clubs can only spend 70% of their revenue. So that's if you're not in Europe. So I think the Premier League are going to adopt that. So if you're in Europe, you can only spend 70% of your revenue. If you're not in Europe, you'll be able to spend 85% of your revenue. So what that means for Newcastle is nothing. We're still going to be in a financial shithole in 3 years' time. So nothing really is going to change. And I think I can see the merit in kind of falling in line with UEFA, so it's more uniform, and the Premier League aren't some rogue organisation doing their own thing and stuff. But I do kind of scratch my head and wonder why we would sign up for this when that really handcuffs us into be able to spend what we need to spend to keep up. Because it's the same. These top 6 clubs have got massive revenue streams, which means they can spend so much more money than everyone else. And things on the surface, things won't really change, Jack, will they?
It's hard to say, really. Like, first of all, with current PSR, so there's the 105 million loss, which was the figure that they decided 10 years ago when they set this up. That hasn't been adjusted for inflation. So I think that's part of the problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah, so that's why it's become a problem in the last year or two with Forest, Everton's troubles that they've been in. Like, if it had been adjusted to inflation, I think it'd be something like 230 million. So we wouldn't be anywhere near being in this mess that we've been in the last few days. So that's probably a good thing that they haven't got this sort of arbitrary loss you're allowed to make, because it's split into sort of good loss and bad loss as well. We've actually lost almost 160 million over our last 3 reporting periods, but because you're allowed to write some of that off for things like women's development and infrastructure, then it doesn't count. So another problem with PSR is obviously the time it takes for these sanctions to come in for Everton and Forest. That really affected the integrity of the Premier League last season. The clubs have found a workaround now. There's a loophole, like Chelsea, Everton, Forest, and us have worked out a way of finding a loophole to this. The Premier League have said they're going to question this. The the big clubs want it to continue as it is because they make huge amounts of money. We're hopefully going to be on that track as well. So by the time, I mean, we are making more money. Our revenue for the next financial year is going to be significantly higher because of the Adidas money, the seller money, and the Champions League money. But the squad cost thing, so the wages to turnover, that's usually what causes problems for clubs like us who are trying to catch up, because we don't have the revenue and we're paying wages to try and compete with the bigger clubs. So the squad cost is also going to count wages, amortized transfer fees, and agent fees as well. So that's what's going to be put against your revenue. Our wages to turnover in the last accounts were 75%, but that doesn't include obviously the amortized transfer fees. I think it took it over 100%. Swiss Ramble said so. We need to get that down to 85%. So that's where that's going to come in. So we'll just have to see what happens. It's going to be slow, I think, slower than what we would want for us to get to where we're going, but I do think we're on the right track. We just need to try and maximize these revenues and commercial streams. But now we can start selling players. That's the big one. That's what Chelsea have done. Liverpool have done it over the years. Man City. They sell academy players for 15, 20 million. Yeah. So Man United haven't done it, but they rely on their monstrous income revenues from commercial. Yeah. So we will get there. We're still going to be away behind the big six, but it's just going to take smart scouting, recruitment, which I think we've by and large done pretty well lately. We've just had this close call this weekend, seemingly. But yeah, there's the current rules. They're bullshit, really. And I know we signed up for them, but how can it be right that we need a right winger? We've got a good young right winger who we've had to sell to a Premier League rival just so we can go out the next week if we want and buy a better right winger. For more money.
That's the thing. It's
backwards.
It's totally backwards. And I'm dead against this whole cost to revenue stuff. I think it's absolutely stupid. I think gone are the days now where you're going to get clubs like Leeds and Portsmouth and things like that get themselves in so much of a financial hole from dodgy owners that they get bloody plummeted down the leagues and things like that. I think with the owners and directors test and things like that, there's a lot of stringent things that you need to meet in order to facilitate buying a club, and Everton found that out, obviously, with the 777 guys and Melbourne Victory here. They found out pretty quick. And that's all kind of gone to ground and things like that. But yeah, I think honestly that the easiest way to do it is to keep it how it is, but just make that 105 million ceiling higher. Even if you don't even have to go as high as what the inflation is now. You could seriously go 50% of that. Even just lift it to 150, it would make a world of difference. And I think it would make the Premier League more competitive. I think that'd kind of open the door for more clubs like Newcastle and Villa, and perhaps there might be a West Ham as well that could kind of try and break through if they weren't handcuffed as much as they were. And maybe Brighton, if you dangled that carrot in front of them, they might have a genuine crack at trying to break into the top six as well.
Yeah, and the problem is you've got these rules, which I don't think they were brought in deliberately to benefit the big clubs, but a byproduct of them is it benefits the big clubs because they're the ones that make all the money. We've got no debt, our club. Man United have got billions of debt. Other clubs have got millions and millions of debt. Brighton owe 500 million to their owner, who may or may not ever ask for that back. It's interest-free loans, but it's like we are owned by some of the richest people in the whole world. So why can't they just push a set amount of money in some kind of trust somewhere, and then they can say, right, well, as long as you've got that, you can cover your costs for however long.
Pony it up.
I'm very aware that we're talking about this as Newcastle fans whose club is new rich. So it's kind of hypocritical because before we never cared about PSR because we never spent any money, so it didn't affect us. But
why would we buy players? We can give our old ones new contracts.
Exactly.
Stupid.
But smaller clubs, it's the food chain. So smaller clubs will always have players taken from bigger clubs. There's a problem with the current rules that it actually incentivizes you to sell your best academy
Yeah.
players, or it just incentivizes you to swap academy players between you, so you both cheat the system.
Yeah.
So I think that it's definitely got to end the way it is at the moment, and because the rules are changing, I don't think we're ever going to have another situation like we just had the last couple of days, which is maybe a good or a bad thing, depends on how much you like feeling stressed out in the middle of the night when you check Twitter.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's there's sort of wide, when you're football fans, you don't want to talk about PSR and finances and executives and squad cost ratio. You don't want to talk about this stuff, but
No.
just the way it is, I guess that's that's kind of how it is now. So something simpler that we didn't have to spend so much time thinking about this stuff would be nice.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, like the top clubs have picked off the best players from
Forever.
the rest of the other 14, if you want to call them that. And they do it because they can, but the lower club has to kind of accept it because it gives them money to re-strengthen the players. And we spoke about this with Bruno once that contract, and we found out that he had the release clause that finished at the end of June. That it felt like a win-win for us. Like, if we sell him, great, we've got 100 million and we can really bloody pin the ears back in the transfer window. But if he stayed, great, we've still got Bruno. But if you go through, like, Man City had bought Jack Grealish, Arsenal brought Declan Rice, Man U brought Harry Maguire, Liverpool bought Van Dijk from lower level Premier League clubs as well. Like, Chelsea have bloody gone Cucurella and Casado and all that from Brighton. Like, they've all picked off the best players from the other teams at the same time, weakening them to an extent because they've lost their best player. And I know that there's 10 other players in a team and things like that. But when you're taking the best player out of a team, it makes a massive difference. And that's the system that it's set up to do. The clubs that can afford it do it, and the clubs that kind of have to sell them because, and they sell the lure of playing with a big club and playing in Europe and all that sort of stuff. But the reality is they're just picking them off and weakening their rivals every chance they get.
I guess this has happened all through the years. Man United in the 90s used to sign the best players from other clubs. It's just sort of the natural way of things, I guess. It's just that now, yeah, you sort of smaller clubs are sort of, if you want to try and compete and be ambitious, then you sort of get punished for it. It's just farcical that Villa get to the Champions League and then they have to sell their best midfielder to make sure that they don't get in financial trouble, even though they're about to get all of this extra money from the Champions League, which will come into their accounts this time next year. So yeah, it's just a bit backwards, the whole thing, and the way it's developed. So we'll have to see what happens with the new rules. But from our perspective, we just have to hope that we understand, we've got a good grip. It seems like something in our understanding of it has fallen away in the last, and we've basically got out of jail. Whether this was part of the big master plan all along, and that we knew that someone was going to come and buy Minte because what would have happened if he hadn't had a decent half season, and he wasn't worth 30 million all of a sudden?
So they knew this at the end of the transfer window. So nothing had changed once the transfer window ended this time last season. They would have been able to forecast.
Yeah.
That even though after the summer transfer window, they would have known the hole that they were in, and they would have forecast that, shit, we've got to find this money. And once the sort of January one come and gone, and they knocked back the Kieran Trippier deal and Miggy, I don't know how deep the Saudi stuff was, but however deep it was, he knocked it back anyway. Said, I don't want to go there, which, like we said in part one, was totally his prerogative. He's entitled to do whatever he wants to do, but there just has to be something that fell through that they weren't anticipating falling through to fall into this hole. Now, I'm not sure what you can sort of factor in for 60 million that they thought was going to happen, but there's no way at the end of the last summer transfer window they thought we're going to make good money on Minter because he'd barely played a game. No one knew the season he was going to have. Like, I think that's luck more than really good planning. I think the good planning might have happened in maybe 2-3 years' time. And I still think they probably anticipated him playing for us and go out and get some experience. I don't think they bought him with the intent to sell him and make money. I think they actually bought him with good intentions to let him develop and come into our team as a really exciting prospect. But yeah, whatever's happened in the last 10 months is pretty alarming to see us that we've had to sell him, rush it, like really push through a sale, and Elliot Anderson as well. So we didn't get faced with a 10-point deduction going into the next season, which is frightening to think that would have happened if they didn't find a buyers for these players.
Well, yeah, like that's why my overriding feeling is just kind of relief about all this, that we've actually got away with it. I did wonder whether this was all part, like, because this is the Saudis and PIF, and they're very smart people. I don't know how involved they've been here, but I did wonder if there was a plan. They must have had a plan and a backup plan and a backup plan. So they must have had some idea about what they were going to do to get out of this. That didn't mean wait until the last day to sell two players like this for what looked like pretty inflated.
Or what could have been an Anthony Gordon or Alexander Isak.
Yeah, but
in the last kind of 2 days either.
And like I said in part one, that would have been disastrous as far as I'm concerned. That would have been real cause for concern, and we'll never know how close we were actually to that, because for some reason Brighton and Forest have come and given us a big helping hand. So yeah, very kind of stressful and difficult situation. But like I said, you look at where we actually are. We haven't got a points deduction. We haven't lost any of our first team players. We've actually added to the squad in position that we needed, goalkeeper. We've kept all the big players, and the accounting period now resets, so we can go in the next 2 months with a goal to fill those squad positions that we need, and will hopefully be a squad overhaul. I think in future years, I think this might be the last year. That depends how we do this season, but Bruno, Isak, maybe even Gordon, if they have good seasons, and if the club isn't in the Champions League again, maybe they might go, and you sell one of them, and then that's it. You know, you don't have to do it.
That's our Jack Grealish kind of thing.
And I do wonder if Bruno was that was what they anticipated this summer. If they thought we will sell Bruno, I think I'm thinking that the more I think about this, that would have been one thing that would have just got rid of all of this stuff, this financial concern. And like I said, I think the fans had been primed for that to happen. And it wouldn't have been viewed as a big disaster if he had been sold, even though for me he's our best player. So it would have been a big problem. But yeah, it's all about how the club communicate and the optics of how things look as well. This has looked very chaotic and haphazard. So, and we've heard from Chris Waff, and who is someone who I think everyone can trust in very clear detail, like confirming the details that had come out over the last few days. So I'm a person who always wants to think the best of the club, and that, you know, they know what they're doing, and I think generally they do. But it does seem very much like they've got away with it big time this weekend, and let's hope we don't see another weekend like it.
Yeah, so hopefully, there's some strong lessons learned. And breaking news as well, when you mentioned we've signed a goalkeeper, we've actually signed 2 goalkeepers, Jack. A ripe 37-year-old John Ruddy's just arrived from Birmingham on a free transfer and a 1-year contract, and he's going to bring leadership, Eddie said. So we're just going to have a locker room full of leaders, no one to follow. Everyone's just going to be leading. So I'm not sure what this means for James Trafford. It on the surface, it looks like that's dead in the water, and Vlachodimos is going to be the number 2, and we cross everything that Nick Pope's shoulders hold up for a full 38-game season, because, I'm not sure the alternatives are going to help us out in any way. And I think that probably signals the end of Martin Dubravka's time. Yeah. Not that it was any doubt about it, but I just don't think he's going to hang around and fight for his position with John Ruddy. So that probably sees him off. I think Celtic were mentioned a few weeks ago. Whether there's any substance to that, who knows? But that's every little cent counts in our FFP or PSR kitty now, and we don't want to ever find ourselves in the debacle and the hole we found ourselves in going into the end of the financial year. So we might wrap that up there, Jack. A nice little two-parter. We've been away for a few weeks, but probably not a few weeks, maybe a couple of weeks, and just had a bit of what we intended to have a little off-season break, which has turned into bloody manic chaos in the last week. And like we said in part one, we kind of, this has been planned for probably 3 or 4 times, but we just kept getting pushed back. And in the end, we said there's too much stuff going on. Let's just let it all happen, and we'll unpack it once July 1st hits. So hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back a bit more regularly now with breaking news and transfers and everything like that. Jack, I know you've been excited and really keen to come on tonight and dive into all this and unpack what it is and what happened. And like you said, it's definitely been one of the most chaotic weeks in our club's history. That's saying something. We've had plenty of weeks that have been littered with chaos, but yeah, for me, this one's right up there, if not number one, in terms of all the stuff that happened in such a short space of time. So it's been great to unpack with you. Thanks everyone for listening or watching as well. Don't forget, subscribe, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the week that was the end of financial year bonanza, and we'll see you. We'll be back soon with more pods. So thanks very much for your time, Jack.
Cheers. I'll see you soon.
See you, everyone.